Alan, what are the threats facing a clinical laboratory today?
Obviously, reimbursement is a number one, and and the reason that it's very challenging to get reimbursed today. It's not because the services we provide aren't valuable; they are, and we've delivered that message. It's just there's such a squeeze now in the budgets of federal government, state governments, and as the government plays an increasingly large role as a payer. Now, the federal government pays more than 50% of the healthcare bills in this country, and that will increase with the healthcare law. And with the deficits, there's a real squeeze, and they're looking for every place they can to cut reimbursement. So most of the cuts that we've had have not been because we're labs, it's just because we happen to be in healthcare, and so we're getting cut with a lot of these across-the-board cuts. So I think reimbursement is going to be a threat. We're going to have to fight to keep from being cut more by Medicare, and there's specific threats coming in the next few months. We're going to have to be fighting to get across the value message to private payers. Although, I think they've been a little more willing to listen to our message about the value of what we're doing. So that reimbursement is number one, and that's probably 3/4 of what we do. 3/4 of the work we do in advocacy is on reimbursement for laboratory services, and with genetics in particular. The problem has been, in terms of getting cut, is they're a little bit more of a target because they are more expensive, and of course they're more expensive. There's a lot of R&D that goes into them and so forth. But anything that has a bigger price tag is going to have a bigger target by government. Number one. Number two, this is moving we're advancing so quickly with molecular testing that policymakers, it's hard for them to keep up with the complexity of them and what they do. There's just a less understanding of what a genetic test to determine the likely reoccurrence of breast cancer versus a cholesterol test. Everyone understands a cholesterol test or a glucose test for the most part, what their value is. But these molecular tests are much more complex, so they are a bigger target. So reimbursement, number one, I would say that's followed by regulatory initiatives that the Food and Drug Administration is threatening to make, where they would come in and regulate most genetic and molecular tests. Most genetic molecular tests are developed within the laboratory. They're not a kit sold by a manufacturer, about 80%. So FDA has come in and is threatening to require these laboratory-developed genetic tests to go through a very expensive and lengthy approval process, which, first of all, would be so expensive that many of these tests would never get off the ground anymore and would really shut down the innovation it would stifle the innovation that's going on. But it would really also duplicate the regulation that's CLIA already, the Clinical Laboratory Act already regulates laboratories. So it's really very unnecessary because it would duplicate some regulation that's worked pretty well. So I'd say the reimbursement and regulation are the two major things from government that are threatening us. And there are other threats, but I wouldn't comment on those. Our job here is to influence government and government policy toward labs. All the things over in the private sector and how labs compete and so forth is not something that we can get involved with. But I think the government there are some threats there that we need to work together to change those policies.